Welcome to the System Read Podcasts. I'm Sarah, joined by Marcus, and today we are performing a high-speed deconstruction of a text that has become something of a secular Bible for the productivity-obsessed. Cal Newport's Deep Work. Marcus, you've been championing this as the operating system for the modern elite, but I see a philosophy that is dangerously out of step with the collaborative, hyper-responsive reality of 2026.
Sarah, the urgency of this book is exactly why it feels out of step with a culture that has fundamentally lost its way. Newport defines deep work as professional activities performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that push your cognitive capabilities to their limit. He argues that this ability is becoming increasingly rare. At the exact same time, it is becoming increasingly valuable in our economy. In a world dominated by AI and automated scripts, the human network router is obsolete. The only way to remain relevant is to cultivate what Eric Barker calls the superpower of the 21st century, the ability to go deep.
That sounds like a wonderful tagline for a retreat in the Swiss woods. But let's look at the mechanics. Marcus, you're obsessed with Newport's high-value skills argument. He gives us this neat little formula. High-quality work produced equals time spent times intensity of focus. It's clean, it's mathematical, and I think it's a total hallucination for anyone in a modern organization.
Why? The science of performance supports it. Newport points to the work of K. Anders Ericsson on deliberate practice, which requires that your attention is focused tightly on a specific skill without distraction. Neuroscientists have even identified a physical mechanism, myelin, a layer of fatty tissue that wraps around neurons, allowing circuits to fire faster and cleaner. To be great at something is to be well myelinated, and you only trigger that by firing the same circuit in isolation, again and again. If you're trying to learn a complex skill like SQL or Python while checking your Slack feed, you're firing too many circuits simultaneously and haphazardly to isolate the neurons you actually want to strengthen.
Myelination is great for concert pianists or solo authors like J.K. Rowling, who apparently has to hide in five-star hotels to finish a chapter. But Newport's formula forgets the variables of social currency and visibility. In 2026, you can produce a high-quality work in total isolation. But if nobody saw you do it, or if you were unresponsive to your team for 4 hours to achieve it, you've effectively committed professional suicide. He cites Nate Silver as a winner in the economy because of his data simulations. But Silver's value wasn't just his quiet mastery. It was his presence on the New York Times blog, his constant engagement with the national spike in traffic. Newport's formula ignores that responsiveness is often the competitive advantage that secures the next contract or promotion.
You're confusing busyness with value. Newport highlights Jason Ben, who realized his job as a financial consultant could be automated by a kludged-together Excel script. Ben quit, locked himself in a room with only textbooks and note cards, no computer, and taught himself to code by clocking 5 or more disconnected hours a day. He went from making $40,000 to $100,000 in 6 months. He didn't get that raise by being visible on Slack. He got it by mastering a hard skill that is difficult to replicate. Shallow work, the emails, the meetings, the logistical tasks, is easy to replicate and creates little new value. It is a systemic tax on human intelligence.
Is it a tax, or is it the social glue? Newport mocks the any benefit mindset, where people use a tool if they can find any possible benefit for it. He suggests we instead adopt the craftsman approach to tool selection, only using a tool if its positive impacts on our core goals substantially outweigh the negatives. But Marcus, for a junior executive, the negative of being offline for 4 hours is a total loss of political capital. Newport's Four Philosophies of Deep Work are a roadmap to isolation. Let's talk about the first one, the monastic philosophy.
The monastic approach is the most extreme. It involves eliminating or radically minimizing shallow obligations. Think of Donald Knuth, the computer scientist who hasn't had an email address since 1990. He says his role is to be on the bottom of things, not on top of things, and that requires uninterruptible concentration. Or Neil Stephenson, who refuses email so he can write novels instead of a bunch of email messages.
It's pure ivory tower elitism. Knuth and Stevenson are at the top of their food chains. This philosophy assumes you have an administrative assistant to sort your physical mail and a gatekeeper to protect your deep work chamber. For 99% of knowledge workers, the monastic approach isn't a strategy. It's a fantasy. If I tell my boss I'm going monastic for the next month, I won't have a job to come back to.
That's why Newport offers alternatives. There's the bimodal philosophy used by Carl Jung. He had a busy clinical practice in Zurich, but he would retreat to his tower in Bollingen for days at a time to write in absolute solitude. Then there's the rhythmic philosophy, where you transform deep work into a regular habit, like Brian Chappell, a doctoral candidate with a full-time job and a kid who woke up at 5:30 every morning to work on his dissertation before his real day started. He called it astronomically productive and guilt-free.
Even the rhythmic approach is a massive drain on willpower. Newport admits that willpower is a finite resource that gets depleted as you use it. He cites a study by Wilhelm Hoffmann and Roy Baumeister showing that people fight desires for things like checking email and social media all day long. To expect someone to wake up at 4:45 a.m. to do deep work while the rest of their day is a fragmented mess of directed attention fatigue is asking for burnout. And let's not forget the journalistic philosophy, which Newport himself uses. He says he fits deep work wherever he can into his schedule. To me, that just sounds like someone who is perpetually stressed and never fully present.
Actually, the journalistic approach requires you to be practiced enough in concentration that you can switch from shallow to deep on a moment's notice. It's about being confident in the value of what you're producing. But let's get to the most controversial part of Newport's OS, the total rejection of social media. He calls it the digital slot machine, or crack for media addicts. He argues that we should quit these services for 30 days and then ask if our lives would have been notably better if we'd used them.
This is where I find him most out of touch. He argues that social media provides a simulacrum of importance without requiring effort. He thinks people only like your status, so you'll like theirs in a shallow collectivist alternative to real value. But Marcus, in 2026, social media is the marketplace. Newport looks at writers like Malcolm Gladwell and Michael Lewis who don't tweet and says, "See, you don't need it." But Gladwell and Lewis are legacy brands. For a new creator, quitting social media is professional suicide. Newport admits that earning people's attention online is hard work. Yet he tells us to ignore the very tools designed to capture that attention.
He isn't saying attention isn't valuable. He's saying your attention is the most valuable thing you own, and you're giving it away for free to companies in Silicon Valley. He uses the law of the vital few, the 80-20 rule, to argue that 80% of your success comes from 20% of your activities. If Twitter doesn't support the 20% of activities that generate the bulk of your success, why use it? Newport notes that even if a service offers some benefit, it's a zero-sum game. Every hour you spend finding old high school friends on Facebook is an hour you aren't spending on the high-impact activities that actually move the needle.
But Newport's needle is always solo productivity. He ignores the whiteboard effect. He talks about Bell Labs and how they intentionally built long hallways so scientists would serendipitously bump into each other. That interaction led to the transistor. He tries to pivot this by saying those scientists also had private, soundproofed offices. But my point is that the swirl of ideas happens in the shallows. If you drain the shallows completely, as he suggests in rule number 4, you're draining the pool of inspiration.
He isn't suggesting you drain them completely. He suggests you schedule every minute of your day. He wants you to give every minute a job. If your schedule is disrupted, you rewrite it. The goal is to maintain a thoughtful say in what you're doing. He also advocates for a shallow work budget, asking your boss what percentage of your time should be spent on logistical tasks. If the answer is 100%, Newport bluntly says you're in a job that doesn't value depth, and you should start planning your exit.
Schedule every minute. Marcus, that is a recipe for a neurotic breakdown. He even suggests productive meditation, focusing your attention on a single professional problem while walking or jogging. He says you have to bring your attention back when it wanders, just like mindfulness meditation. And then there's the card memorization. He wants us to learn how to memorize a shuffled deck of cards just to strengthen our attentional control. This isn't a way to live. It's a way to become a machine.
No, it's a way to become human again. Newport argues that a deep life is a good life. He cites Winifred Gallagher, who found that our brains construct our worldview based on what we pay attention to. If you focus on the pinprick onslaught of small obligations, the scam emails, the office politics, the logistical friction, your mind will construct a world dominated by stress and triviality. But if you cultivate rapt attention, you hijack your attention apparatus, preventing you from noticing the small, unpleasant things. He also brings in Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's theory of flow, that human beings are at their best when stretched to their limits in a voluntary effort to accomplish something difficult.
I agree that flow is a peak human experience. But Newport's methods for achieving it are so rigid. He mentions Robert Caro, who governs every inch of his office with rules, down to what he wears. Or Charles Darwin, who walked a prescribed route every day until he was satisfied with his thinking. These rituals are designed to minimize the friction of transitioning into depth. I get that. But Newport's shutdown ritual, where he literally says, shutdown complete, to end his day, is just weird. He claims it's to battle the Zeigarnik effect, the ability of incomplete tasks to dominate our attention.
It works! By making a plan for how you'll later complete an unfinished task, you free up cognitive resources for the rest of your life. Newport is trying to protect the idleness that is indispensable to the brain. He cites unconscious thought theory, UTT, which suggests that for complex decisions with vague constraints, your unconscious mind is better suited to tackle the issue than your conscious mind. By shutting down completely at 5:30 p.m., he's actually allowing his Google-scale unconscious centers to work on his most complex professional challenges while he reads books to his kids.
Finish your work by 5:30. He calls it fixed schedule productivity. He says it shifts you into a scarcity mindset where you're forced to ruthlessly cull the shallow while protecting the deep. It sounds great on paper, but in the corporate world of 2026, if my boss emails me at 8 p.m. and I don't respond until 9 a.m. because of my shutdown ritual, I'm not a deep worker. I'm just the first person on the layoff list. Newport even admits that some people, like Jack Dorsey, thrive without depth because their role as an executive is to be a hard-to-automate decision engine. They need to be in a state of constant distraction because they are processing inputs for others.
And that's the trap. Most of us aren't Jack Dorsey. Most of us are more like Jason Ben or Nate Silver, people whose value is tied to their ability to produce something rare and valuable. Newport notes that in an industrial economy, most workers were paid to crank widgets and didn't need to concentrate. But in our information economy, deep work is the new currency. If you spend your day as a human network router, you are easily replaceable. If you can go deep, you can master hard things quickly and produce at an elite level. That is how you win.
So, is it a sustainable operating system or a nostalgic dream? I think Newport is pining for a pre-connected era. He talks about how the world used to be a world of sacred, shining things, and how the Enlightenment stripped that away. He thinks craftsmanship is the path to meaning, whether it's Rick Furr smithing a Viking sword or Santiago Gonzalez writing beautiful code. He believes that a deep life is not just economically lucrative, but also a life well lived. But Marcus, the world is only getting more connected, not less. We can't all build stone towers in the woods.
We don't have to. We just have to build eudaimonia machines in our own schedules. The machine is a setting designed for the sole purpose of enabling the deepest possible flourish. Even if it's just a deep work chamber in our mind, it's the only way to resist the metric black hole, the region where it's impossible to measure the cost of distraction. Companies don't see the cost of slack because they can't quantify it, so they fall back on the principle of least resistance, which says we'll do what's easiest in the moment, and what's easiest is being constantly connected.
I'll give you this. Newport is right that busyness is often a proxy for productivity. In the absence of clear indicators of value, we turn back to the industrial indicator of doing lots of stuff in a visible manner. If Marissa Mayer at Yahoo assumes that if you're not visibly busy, you're not productive, then the whole system is rigged against depth. But until the system changes, Newport's advice is for the lucky few.
Then be one of the lucky few. That is the deep work hypothesis. The few who cultivate this skill and then make it the core of their working life will thrive. It's not about nostalgia. It's about a pragmatic recognition that concentration gets valuable things done. Whether you're Bill Gates hacking BASIC in 1974 or a developer in 2026, the serial obsessor wins.
I think we've reached a stalemate. I see a manual for elitist isolation. You see a manifesto for cognitive survival. But maybe that's the point. Newport isn't trying to change the world. He's trying to teach the individual how to survive it. Whether we like it or not, the focused few are the ones writing the future, even if they're too busy working deeply to ever read my Slack messages about it.
Exactly. Shutdown complete.
Not yet, Marcus. We still have to hit the upload button. That's a shallow task, right?
Strictly logistical, but I'll allow it, for now.
Thank you for listening to this discussion on the System Read podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the like button and subscribe to ensure you don't miss our upcoming deep dives.